Hello, and thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Carol Jenkins. The show is Black America. Today, a conversation about autism and autism spectrum disorder. And while the incidence in Black communities is the same as overall, diagnosis and currently, crucially, treatment is often significantly delayed for Black children. With us today to talk about this is Maria Davis-Pierre, a licensed mental health counselor, autism awareness advocate, and founder of Autism in Black. And Maria, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, you're an expert, and you're an expert in every single way. Let's talk a little bit about your family. You have 3 children, 2 of whom are autistic.
Yes.
Can you tell us their ages and how you discovered that? And
Sure. So I have 3 children, like you said. I have a 10-year-old, and then I have 7-year-old boy-girl twins. So my 10-year-old is autistic, and my 7-year-old son is autistic. My daughter got her diagnosis at 18 months officially, although we knew before that. And it was a struggle getting her diagnosis. I am a licensed therapist. My husband is a physician. He is an internist. So we were in the rooms with our colleagues advocating for getting our daughter the diagnosis because we knew she was autistic. All of our colleagues were agreeing, but wanted us to wait until she was 3 for her to get her official diagnosis. If anybody knows about early intervention, you know
sure.
that comes before 3. So they wanted us to wait until after she was 3. So I ended up sitting in the neurologist's office for a week boycotting to get the paperwork. So that's how she got her diagnosis. My son got his diagnosis at 5, and it was because the school put all of his characteristics together. What I was seeing was sensory processing, but when put together, the school was feeling like he was autistic. So we got him diagnosed as well. So that's how they both got their diagnosis.
Yeah, and Maria, just as we were talking before we started, you told me that you yourself have been diagnosed as autistic. How did that happen? Did you decide that you had the same symptoms as your children, or what?
No, not at all. I actually was going to my psychiatrist to get ADHD medication. So I've known that I've been ADHD since I was in college, and I was going to get medication because COVID has done a number on me.
Sure.
And my psychiatrist was like, well, all the characteristics you're explaining seem like autism. Has anybody mentioned that? So we went through that diagnosis process, and that's how I ended up with my diagnosis completely by chance.
Amazing. That happened to a very close friend of mine who, when he was 40 plus, was diagnosed on the spectrum. And we'll talk about the use of that word as well. But it explained to him so much the difficulties that he had been having in life, and really gave him a great deal of relief and also treatment and an understanding of what it was that was in the way of his feeling at ease with himself. And I was astonished when I was looking at the recent statistics that they're using 1 in 44 children is autistic. And I remember the day because, my first career life was as a speech pathologist, and I worked with autistic children. In those days, it was 1 in 150 or 200 or 300, if they even, counted or did bother to count. But now 1 in 44 children in the United States of America can be described as autistic.
Yes, and I don't think it's an epidemic that's happening. What I think is happening is that healthcare professionals are more aware of how to properly diagnose. So children are getting their diagnosis. I don't think it's like an epidemic that's occurring. I think it's more awareness within the medical field, and people are getting the proper diagnosis.
So let's talk about this disconnect, because we, said in the beginning of the show that the rates are essentially the same, but the treatment, the diagnosis and the treatment for Black children is so much later, which really interferes with taking care of the symptoms. Talk to us about that. Is it the lack of a sense of timelines of children, not meeting it, or what do you assess this delay in? We know that it's, parents, and it's also the medical profession, at fault here.
So truly what it is, it has to do with racism and bias against the Black community. There is a overall 1.5-year gap between when a Black child gets a diagnosis and when a white child gets a diagnosis. A lot of that has to do with the stigma outside of our community as well as the stigma within our community. And really what it boils down to is the biases of healthcare professionals. The reason the CDC came out and said that there is no difference in races is because it was obvious that Black children, Latino children were not getting diagnosed at the same rate white children were. Studies have shown that a Black parent can go into a medical professional's office and talk about their concerns, and it will take them 3 to 4, 5 times of mentioning it before the healthcare professional does the next step. So of course, this delays diagnosis. There's also bias within the actual evaluations. So there is so much that has to do with just biases that keep Black children from getting the proper diagnosis. We are the most undiagnosed and misdiagnosed. We're more than likely to get a behavior diagnosis like ADHD or oppositional defiance before autism.
Right, right. Oh my goodness. So what would you say, you knew very early on with one of your children that she was autistic, but what were you seeing, and what should parents be on the lookout for?
For her, she was very typical in her characteristics. So one, we thought that she was deaf. She had such a slow response time to any loud noise or her name that we actually thought she was deaf. Got her hearing tested and her hearing was fine. There were sensory issues, so the grass in the front yard would be okay, but the grass in the backyard would not be okay. And then the biggest indicator for us was that she actually regressed in her speech. So at one point she was saying mom, dad, and ball, and then one day it was just as if she could not say those words anymore.
And with your son, what did you see there?
He had a lot of sensory seeking characteristics. So he would do stuff that was actually pretty harmful just because he was seeking that sensory, that sensation. So there was one point where he jumped down 2 flights of stairs just to get that sensation. He also had a speech delay as well. And then he also had other sensory processing issues, kind of like my daughter, but different. So tags bothered him, certain socks bothered him, shoes. If his clothes got wet, he did not like that. It took a lot more for me to see autism with my son than my daughter because his characteristics were not presenting like medical characteristics.
So that, and as you say, before 3 is when the treatment, the diagnosis and the treatment really needs to be had in order to get the full blast of a treatment.
When early intervention happens. So there's technically no treatment for autism because it's just who we are. But as far as early intervention, like your speech therapies, your occupational therapies, that's when research has shown that children really absorb that. Not to say that they can't after 3, but before 3 is really a crucial time.
Right, I'm interested in your own, if you could tell us as an adult, because I know that there are, at least a dozen adults who are watching this who say, oh, that's me, So what was it about you that you finally realized? I know the doctor pointed out, it might be autism. And what was happening to you? What were you sensing then that?
So for me, I've always really, when both of my children got diagnosed, it wasn't like a big thing with me because I related to them so much. My own sensory issues with loud noises, I get touched out quickly. So meaning that, there's a certain point in the day where I just don't want to be touched. I need to be alone. My social skills, even though I know that, a lot of people see me speaking and engaging, it takes a lot out of me and I have to recover from it because I'm not a very social person. I don't have a large friend group. I also have stimming. So I rock, as a coping mechanism, click my nails. So there's many characteristics. My food choices are very slim as well. So I related a lot to my children. I was just like, okay. And then my physician was like, yeah, you're definitely autistic. So I was like, okay.
No question about it, right?
Yeah.
Definitely. And you took that diagnosis well as well. Oh, great, as my friend did. Oh, that's what it is. Now I can deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
So talk to us about then what happens school-wise, support-wise. I'm the mother of a child with special needs, so I understand the lifelong and the constant, attention that needs to be paid to that, development. And you're providing all of this advice and tools that parents, Black parents especially, can use with a child with autism.
Exactly. So usually there's two different types of diagnosis. So a child can get a medical diagnosis by a physician or a psychologist, or they can get a school categorization. But sometimes children, especially Black children, will just have one and not the other. They're more than likely to have a school categorization than a medical diagnosis. A school categorization will get them an IEP, which is an individual education plan, or a 504 plan, which provides supports within the school system. Supports of goals, accommodations. So for instance, my children have a lot of accommodations. My son, because he is a sensory seeker, sits on a yoga ball, and that helps him within the classroom to regulate himself. They also have visual schedules, motion cards that they can use to let their teacher know where they're at. So there's many accommodations that they can have and modifications. So usually that's where it starts within the school system, but it's extremely hard for Black parents to advocate within the school system.
And even the expense of it, how getting the expert advice and treatment, how does that work for families?
It is extremely expensive. So when we're thinking of therapies out of pocket, for people with insurance, the average is 50 to 60,000 a year. And then for medical expenses out of pocket with insurance, we're looking at 12,000 a year. So we're looking at total 72,000 on average to raise one child with a disability.
And you have two at this
Yes.
point. The one thing that we as parents of children with differences worry about is the bullying and just making their way in the world. Talk with us a little bit about that, because that is a major issue.
It is. And, I'm going to be honest with you, it is something that I constantly worry about and really don't have, an answer to, as far as prepping our children. The real responsibility would be on other parents, really making sure that their children are aware that there are children with disabilities and differences, and that they know and accept them. My daughter is entering her last year of elementary, and I'm already very anxious about her entering middle school, because I know that that is a really crucial time for children. They're, hitting puberty. So
Right.
much is going on. So I'm nervous about that. So, I'm also seeking support and answers, because it's really no set answer to really prepare your children for that.
So tell us about your organization. You're hosting again a huge conference for parents, and to bring them together with advisors and how to make their way through all of this. And we know one of our colleagues, Al Roker, who has a son with autism, and he's talked about his journey with that. So what goes on in your organization and with the conference that you have?
Sure. So my organization came about because of lack of resources for myself as a Black parent and other Black parents in my circle. So I really started the organization to bridge that gap for Black parents because access to information is a privilege, and a privilege that does not often happen within the Black community. So it started out just by making sure that Black parents had the information in regards to autism, that they had the right terminology, that they knew the steps to take. As we've evolved, we've added a podcast. We've added workshops. I train organizations to now be more culturally responsive to the Black disability community. And then, of course, we have our annual conference that we are so excited about that happens yearly. We had our first one last year, and I was completely surprised by the response to it. We had over 300 participants at the conference. Everybody was so amazed and felt so at home within our conference. We're doing it again this year. We have over 20 amazing speakers who will be talking about any and everything to do with autism and the Black community. So yeah, we're very excited.
That's exciting. Now, let's talk a bit about the syndrome or the spectrum, that many people at some point were disfavoring the use of the word spectrum, because those who are very lightly, touched by autism and those who are severely touched by it. And I always hear the reference, well, Einstein was probably autistic, or, the names of other truly gifted people that were somewhat out of the mainstream of it. How do you refer to or think about the lightly touched autistic people who are able to, I guess they're called highly functioning,
Yeah, they do. And what I say is that, again, access to information is a privilege. And if you're not aware of how to reference it, then you go with what you know, right? As far as, the spectrum, we're all somewhere on the spectrum, and we all need a different level of support. I think when we start to use labels like high functioning and low functioning, it does a disservice to that individual. For those who are considered high functioning, people will think that they don't need as many supports when we do. For those who would be considered lower functioning, people never give them the benefit of the doubt to do anything. So I think it does a disservice on both. And I just use the term autistic all around in regards to me, my children, and the community.
And the future, I mean, usually, or it used to be that the diagnosis of autism meant that, that there was some sort of residential facility that one would wind up in ultimately. Talk with us about how things have changed since then in terms of outside supports.
Definitely. I think, again, more awareness has happened. I think because people hear autism, they think intellectual disability, which is not the same thing. Can a person who is autistic have an intellectual disability? Yes, they can. But I don't, and neither do my children. And I think the more information we have, we see that people need support rather than to be, shunned in a residential treatment facility and not have any access to society. We see that there's supports that needed in place, and that's where we're moving towards, as best we can as a society.
So talk to me a bit about the intellectual functioning. Apparently, some of the statistics suggest that Black children have a higher percentage of dysfunction, on that intelligence scale, or 44%.
Yes.
Are somewhat compromised that way, where only 22% of non-Black. And I think, of course, it's the late diagnosis and the lack of early intervention. But what do you think?
I agree. I think it's definitely factors into professionals not being as, taking it as serious as they do with white parents. I also think it's because the evaluations, again, are not culturally responsive. So how Black people present themselves in a room with a professional, if they're not aware of Black culture, then of course some things that they may see us doing, they see as a deficit. So I think it's both of those issues that are happening at the same time, which causes a higher rate of that intellectual disability diagnosis.
So I love the notion of you having to sit in at the doctor's office in order to get the diagnosis for your child. I also know that friends who have children with autism get very depressed, very stressed, and are having an extremely tough time of it from time to time. What advice do you have for them?
One, I think it has to do with the stigmas. That's why I am so loud on my platform. But prior to me even knowing that I was autistic, I was on my platform as a parent, just saying that I have no shame in regards to who my daughter is. You know, I don't want anybody to feel that guilt, because it's not something that we did for our children to be autistic. So I think it has to do with a lot of shame and guilt that parents, especially mothers, put on themselves. So self-care is so important. And this is my therapist side coming out here. But self-care is extremely important. And I'm not talking about what we see on social media, sitting on the beach and lounging, which is a form of self-care. I'm talking more of taking care of our mental space and understanding where we are, regulating our emotions, checking in with ourselves and seeing where we are, not having any shame in being sad, mad, or upset. You know, you go through a whole range of emotions when your child gets a diagnosis, and it's okay to have those emotions. Have no shame in those emotions. Process those emotions, because it'll do better for you and better for your child. So my advice is always self-care, and checking in with yourself.
I love the T-shirt and I want to get one too. Apparently, that you say normal is a drier setting. You know.
Yes, people use that term so loosely, especially when talking about me or my children. They're like, "Oh, you guys are so normal." It's like, okay, I don't understand what you're trying to get at here. Should I, part my hair in an autistic way for you to to see that I'm autistic? So normal is a drier setting. It's not what we use to describe children. It's not what we use to describe people. So keep it to your laundry setting.
I love it, and I love your attitude about the whole thing. That there seems to be, though, many people ask, well, what is causing all of this? And the crazy furor we had about vaccines, that was what caused autism. And of course, medical science has, refuted that. There is some genetic transmission of it. Talk with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as of right now, there is no pinpoint on what causes autism. There is research that says there is a genetic factor, which we could definitely see in my family. I mean, I'm autistic. I have 2 autistic children. I have autistic family members. There's autistic family members on my husband's side. So yes, there is a genetic factor to it. There's also environmental factors that they've been looking at as well. So yes, most definitely. I think it's a genetic and environmental factor that's going on together. And I just want parents to know and understand, and even individuals who are autistic, that there's nothing wrong with us. It's just how our brain operates. And if more people saw it that way, rather than, seeing it as, oh my God, the world is going to end for them, I think that we would really be bridging those gaps for the Black community and every other community.
I know I could have used with an adaptation. I want what does your son have? The yoga ball,
And he loves it. He loves it. He has a lot more accommodations as well, but that's one of his favorite.
Right. Well, certainly it's what we need, is accommodation and acceptance of this, and to have people like you who can really give voice to, here we are, this is how we operate, this is our world, and we can do this.
Most definitely. I think the thing that happens the most is that people count us out. I know when I saw one physician and they saw that I'm autistic, and this was recently, he was like, oh, and you're married and you have kids and you have a stable job. And I'm like, yeah. It's possible, you know? So I think people always, you know, are shocked. And it, again, lack of information that they, and lack of understanding. So that's why I do what I do. But yeah, you know, that's a form of ableism, just counting us out and being able to do everyday things in society. You know, I think that, again, if we just accommodated and modified society, you know, we would definitely be light years ahead of time.
Well, it's a terrific conversation. Maria, thank you for being with us today and for what you're doing for Black children who are autistic and Black mothers and, you know, all of us who may be in the world functioning in a slightly different way. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thanks to Maria Davis-Pierre, CEO and founder of Autism in Black. She's a licensed mental health counselor. For joining us, we thank you so much, and we thank you all out there as well for joining us. I'm Carol Jenkins. The program is Black America, and we will see you the next time.